The year was 1757. To the average person, Russia, let alone Ukraine, was seen as lackluster, behind, and some even dared to call it backwater. To most in the Ukraine, the year wasn't any different than any of the years before. For the last few years, Ukrainians and all peoples of the Russian Empire have been conscripted to fight one of the most large-scale wars in history at that point. However, it was a year that would not only change the history of Ukraine, or not even just Russia, but the entire world. On a cool spring morning, the citizens of Rostov in the Donbass woke to find Ottoman scouts approaching on the horizon. This wasn't new to the citizens of the region, as Russia has been known to have been fighting the Ottomans for centuries at that point. However, as the days went by, it became very clear that something was very, very different. More and more soldiers showed up as each day passed, with bigger guns, more artillery, better equipment. It soon became very clear to the citizens that it was a full-blown Ottoman invasion. The Russian Empire, completely caught off guard while fighting elsewhere, was completely overrun by the surprise attack. Ukraine was occupied all the way up to the Kiev region, where Russians were finally able to mobilize a fighting force in the region. At this point, though, it was too little and too late. The Ukrainians, already bitter at being forced to fight a war they wanted nothing to do with, saw Russia fail to keep their land safe from foreign invasions. Though the Battle of Kiev was ultimately a Russian victory, and ultimately Russia won the war against the Ottomans down the line, it already painted the seeds of separatism in the Ukrainian hearts. Post-war Russia was in a very peculiar situation. In the Tsar's efforts to hold back the Ottomans, he called upon noblemen to raise their own armies in not just Ukraine, but in all regions of the empire. However, most of these men, after the war, wanted to keep their power. Over the next 15 years, the war-torn empire essentially became ruled by aristocrats, with the Tsar being a figurehead. This was made official by 1780, when the Tsar officially gave the largest aristocrats the titles of holy regents. Ukraine itself, however, had an aristocratic government sympathetic to the people. He led the Ukrainian defense against the Ottomans before the official army even arrived. Therefore, was popular amongst the people. He was appointed by the Tsar, and with that, the birth of the Hetman of Ukraine, the first Ukrainian entity since the Kievan Rus. However, his popularity faded as the living situation began to deteriorate. However, a series of border skirmishes with the Duchy of Moscow, one of the larger aristocratic warlord states, began to wane the Hetman's popularity. By 1790, these skirmishes turned into an undeclared war, as Muscovy was succeeding in stealing land from Ukraine. Around this time, the people felt they finally had enough, and more nationalist groups started forming. Specifically, a new figure and party emerged, the Svoboda Party, led by Alexander Dombrowski, also known today as the Vozhd. The Vozhd, unlike other parties and groups in Ukraine, advocated for total secession from Russian influence, seeing the deteriorating Russian political and economic scene convinced many in Ukraine that Russia is incompetent, unstable, and weak. And the Vozhd capitalized off those views, along with promises of a strong, centralized leadership, glory, and safety from the surrounding chaos. And with the problems continuing to be unsolved, the Vozhd's popularity grew to new heights. Eventually, the people had enough. So when the Vozhd and his supporters led a march on Kiev, The hetman saw no reason to resist and stepped down, effectively handing complete power to the vozhd. The hetman himself was allowed to continue living in Ukraine as he was still widely respected. However, he was forbidden from joining any government positions or joining any political movements. With the hetman secured, the only threat now was Russia herself. The vozhd thought that surely Russia would intervene in one way or another. However, to the pleasant surprise to many, Russia recognized the new government as the legitimate government in Ukraine. As Russia was completely incapable of stopping it, both Ukraine and the Tsar made a treaty, completely securing Ukrainian independence in return for no Ukrainian meddling in Russian affairs. The Treaty of Rostov was signed, and with the treaty came a bright future for Ukraine and her people. And better yet, a Middle Eastern nation empathized and related with the Ukrainian struggle. Said Middle Eastern nation was named Ikria. After some negotiations, a brotherly alliance was formed between the two states, furthering the path of glory for each of them. Ukraine is now a regional power, with a strong military and strong allies. But only time will tell if Ukraine will keep her newfound glory.